We are on day 2 here at the 2018 NFL Combine in Indianapolis. Yesterday, we heard from NFL Brad. And today, the prospects. Coming up, we're giving you an inside look around the division on today's edition of Road to the Draft. Hello and welcome to Road to the Draft live from the 2018 NFL Combine. This show is presented by Southeast Michigan Ford Dealers. I'm Tori Petry here at the Indiana Convention Center where all of the media action is happening this week. Yesterday on our live show, we caught you up on everything head coach Matt Patricia and general manager Bob Quinn had to say at the podium, and we broke that down with Tim Twentyman and Mike O'Hara. Today, we're taking it around the division. The NFC North is in an interesting place right now because there's another new coach in the division, a new GM, and maybe even a new quarterback in Minnesota. We'll hear from GMs and coaches on what they had to say yesterday, and a reporter from each team will break that down with us. First, let's start things off with the Chicago Bears. Here's what new head coach Matt Nagy had to say yesterday.
Well, it's important for me to, number one, understand that I'm not just on offense this year. You know, this is the whole phase. So all 60 interviews instead of 30, number one. But that I've always I'm a football junkie, and I just appreciate the game and the different positions that go about it. So I'm not just an offensive guy, and so being able to, I'm intrigued to go into the defensive side and the special team side and be a part of that. So I look forward to that. Well, what you see with Mitch is kind of what I already knew. Is he's first of all, the person you can just you see it on tape from what he did in regards to his interview last year at this combine, and so you can see that in the style of play. You see him go out there and he goes in and he plays hard. You know, he makes some really special throws, and he's learning the tempo and the speed of the game. So for him, just understanding getting in and out of the huddle, being able to get up to the line of scrimmage and then make a play, there's a lot to that process. And so as you can see the growth of him as he develops throughout the year, that he's improving and getting better and better. And for somebody like myself and our staff that comes in, that's really fun. Obviously, Doug and I coached together in Kansas City, and the things that they did. Now, we started our deal in Philadelphia with Coach Reed. Coach Reed had the West Coast offense going strong, and so what we've done is we've kind of tailored to some of the college stuff that's come out and to the way that these players are playing. And so offensively, it was fun for us. It was refreshing, and we just started to grow. So as Doug goes to Philadelphia and he has other coaches that come from different worlds, they're gonna talk through what works and what they like. And so you saw with Philadelphia, they had a lot of success this year. They had fun with it, talking to the guys, and that's what we're gonna do. And we're gonna put our own little spin on it and see how our guys fit. But again, I don't know that exact answer until we get into the different OTAs.
That was Matt Nagy. This is Larry Mayer from the Chicago Bears. Larry, you guys are the other team in the division that's dealing with a new head coach right now. Lions have Matt Patricia. The Bears have Matt Nagy. What is your impression of that new head coach so far?
Well, you know, Tori, it's a really exciting time at Halas Hall because Matt has brought a lot of energy to the building. He's a young guy. You talk to people that know him, that have worked with him, that have played for him. They all say the same thing. He's a very positive guy, 100% into it. He's brought a lot of energy, like I said, into the building, and the Bears have been looking for a franchise quarterback since pretty much World War II. I mean, let's face it, that's how long it's been since Sid Luckman was a Hall of Famer for the Bears, and they feel that they have that player in Mitchell Trubisky, second pick in the draft last year. They needed someone to help groom him and help develop him, so they brought in Matt Nagy, who really did wonders in Kansas City with Alex Smith, who was the #1 ranked passer in passer rating this past season. They hope he can have a similar impact on Mitchell Trubisky. They also brought in Mark Helfrich, the former coach at Oregon, so it's almost like a whole new feeling on offense. The defense is pretty good, pretty young, brought back the defensive staff intact, which a lot of people aren't talking about, but
sure.
It's an exciting time here with a young, energetic head coach.
Well, we heard from him about Mitchell Trubisky a little bit and also about what he plans to do with that new offense. What are your impressions of how that will go, how that transition into Matt Nagy's system will be?
Well, it's hard to say right now because we haven't seen anything on tape or on the field, and really the coaches and players aren't even allowed to talk to each other at this point yet. But if you look at what type of offense they ran in Kansas City, you have to be very excited about it because I think the one thing that they did was really they made the most out of their talent. They put the guys in position to succeed. And with the Bears, you have a lot of different players, guys like Tariq Cohn on offense, who some people have compared to Tyreek Hill of the Chiefs. But it's going to be exciting to me to watch how they take the Bears, the talent that the Bears have, and get the most out of it. And everybody says that Matt is very creative and he uses his players well, so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens there, because the Bears had a defensive-minded head coach in the past with John Fox, and now with an offensive-minded head coach. They've really surrounded Mitchell Trubisky with a lot of people to help him succeed. Now it's going to be a matter of going out and maybe getting some more skill position players in the draft and free agency.
Sure. Well, it's still March. There's still the draft and free agency to come, like you said. Obviously, a disappointing season this last year for the Bears, which often leads to head coaching changes.
Right.
But how soon do you think, way too early prediction, how soon do you think the Bears will be back to where they want to be?
Well, that's a really good question. I wish I could give you a good answer. I'm just hoping that with the new staff in place and the new players that the Bears are relevant again.
Sure.
4 straight years in last place in the NFC North is not cutting it with the fans or with anyone in the building, the McCaskies, the ownership. No one is happy about that. That's why these changes have been made. They have a lot of faith in Ryan Pace as the general manager, and, of course, now they have faith in Matt Nagy as the head coach. So there is some talent there, and, again, it's a coach and quarterback league, and the Bears have those two people in place, which they didn't necessarily have before, Tori. And I think that in itself is going to make it a more attractive free agent destination. There were players last year that took less money to go to other teams than the Bears, that it's been documented. It's reported stories and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be a more attractive place to go, especially for some wide receivers. I know that the Bears are interested in bolstering that position, and I can't tell you when it's going to turn around, but it certainly seems like the arrow's pointing up.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Larry, for weighing in on the Bears. That's the Bears side of things. Let's hear from the Packers. Yesterday, new GM Brian Gutekunst spoke to the media, and here's what he had to say.
What we look for in players and kind of how we set the free agent board hasn't changed a ton, but the meeting process changed a little bit, yes. You know, there's the volume of information we got to get through is pretty significant. So stuff I've been doing for 20 years. So it has that part hasn't changed a whole lot, with the exception of at the end of the evaluation period, I'm the one that puts them up there. So we have some really good players, and we don't want to let them walk out of the door. You know what I mean? Like it's hard enough in this league to find them. So we certainly wouldn't want to let them walk out the door. But it is. You know, there are restraints, and there's things that kind of every decision kind of affects something else. There's limits to what you can do, but we'd like to be really aggressive and see what we can be in every conversation. Now, whether that leads to us end up signing a bunch or not, we'll see. Like I said, there's limitations there, but we'd like to be as aggressive as we can to try to improve our football team. At the same time, it's a smaller market, and it's a little bit riskier market. So I think, you know, as my mentor and predecessor would say, you have to be very cautious as you enter that. But I think we'd like to look at every option we can. When you have the best player in the National Football League, it's not going to be inexpensive. You know what I mean? So, you know, obviously Aaron is a high priority. He's a great player, and you know, I think that'll should take care of itself at some point. So.
All right, you heard from new GM Brian Gutekunst, and I am joined by Mike Spofford from the Packers. Mike, going through a transition in Green Bay as well, just like Detroit is with their new head coach. What's that transition like with the new GM?
Well, it's gone pretty smoothly so far, mostly because Brian Gutekunst has been on the Packers scouting staff, working his way up the ladder for the last couple of decades. And obviously there were, you know, various internal candidates to take over for Ted Thompson. Brian Gutekunst is the one that President and CEO Mark Murphy decided upon. He is a disciple of Ted Thompson, obviously you would say, but I think he's going to, you know, put his own stamp on things, bring his own approach and spirit to the draft and free agency and things like that. So we just have to see how year one is going to go.
Yeah, he spoke about how that transition has gone very smoothly, being an internal candidate for that job. He also talked about Aaron Rodgers and what the situation is there. What are your expectations about that contract?
Well, it sounds like the Packers want to get it done this offseason. Rodgers has 2 years left on his current deal, and this is exactly the same time frame when they extended him the last last time in 2013. There were 2 years left on the deal. They don't want to let him get too close to free agency. You want to find that happy medium to where you take care of him, but because you're extending him, with some time left on the deal, you maybe can save a little bit of money. You can sort out exactly, where you want the cap hits to be. Sure. And deal with that along the way. And that's something that the front office is working through here, because the Packers do want to do some things potentially in free agency this spring.
Yeah, he talked about that in the sound that we just played. He said he wants to be aggressive. How aggressive do you expect him to be?
Well, I think Packers fans when they hear aggressive, they're expecting him to be going after the top guys on the first day or two of free agency all the time. I'm not sure if that's necessarily going to be the approach, but we've heard from head coach Mike McCarthy at a couple different times talking about how he'd like to have, a roster and a depth chart that isn't built quite so much with rookies and young players at the bottom, to where when you have injuries, everybody has them. You need guys in that depth chart to fill in and play 1 or 2 or possibly multiple games. You want to have some experience there. I think the Packers might take the approach of trying to find some guys in that mid-level of free agency, to where you can build the depth chart a little bit stronger, so then if you have a frontline guy go down, there isn't quite the drop-off in experience when you have to go to the next guy.
What positions do you think the Packers might address when it comes to the draft and free agency in order to be stronger for next year?
Well, there's a lot of focus on the defense, certainly, and that starts with pass rush, and then also at cornerback. The Packers used their top pick in the draft last year on a cornerback, but as you know, Tori, you never have enough of those guys in this league with 4 and 5 receiver sets.
Sure.
And all that kind of stuff, so the Packers still want to build there. They'd love to find the next Clay Matthews. Clay Matthews was drafted almost a decade ago. You want to have that linchpin pass rusher on the edge that you can build a defense around. So I think they'd like to find another guy like that. And then on the offensive side of the ball, maybe it's trying to find the next Jordy Nelson. Nelson, I think, still has a lot to offer here for the Packers and Aaron Rodgers. But Aaron Rodgers is probably going to play longer than Jordy Nelson will,
sure.
and he wants that next guy. Devontae Adams is certainly one of those. The Packers extended him before the end of the regular season. But then who's the next big receiver? And, the track record is the Packers have always found their receivers in the second round of the draft. So we'll see if the second round this year is maybe a big pick.
All right, well, there's the Packers' point of view. Last but not least, we're going to take you to the Vikings. So here's what Vikings GM Rick Spielman said yesterday.
I'm sure you want me to address the quarterback situation. We feel very strongly about moving forward because of all the in-depth knowledge we have on our current 3 quarterbacks, also the practical game knowledge that we have on those guys. We're always going to be looking at options in all areas to try to make sure we're finding the best fit for the Minnesota Vikings, not only on the field from a schematic standpoint, but also with the leadership of Coach Zimmer, the culture that has been established in our locker room. Just to make clear, there have been no decisions made. I think we have a lot more knowledge of Teddy than anyone else. I mean, our medical department has rehabbed him ever since the surgery was done. We've seen him in practice. Our coaches have worked with him. He got a chance to play a couple snaps. I think it was in a Cincinnati game. But we probably have more in-depth knowledge than anyone on where he's at right now. If we didn't believe in Case Keenum and what he was able to accomplish, and I'll keep those personnel discussions internally. But, Case Keenum came in, led our football team, did a phenomenal job. He has a knack for making plays. He made a lot of big plays for us because of not only his smarts, his leadership, but his mobility as well. I know we've had internal discussions on how he fits with some of the things Coach DiFilippo wants to do. So Case, we were very excited about what Case was able to accomplish.
There is so much to talk about in terms of what Rick Spielman will be doing this offseason. But before we get to that, the Vikings reached NFC North this past season. What did it take for them to do so well this year?
I think it took a really big-time collective team effort. And we talk all the time when we're writing or talking on camera about football being the ultimate team sport, Tori, and I think the Vikings really personified that last season, going from an outstanding performance by Sam Bradford in Week 1 and then losing them and going to the backup quarterback, but still winning 13 games and going on into the playoffs. And so, Coach Zimmer actually spoke today at the Combine, and he said that in their meetings that they're having, the point that he's hammering home is we've won 40 games over the last 4 years because we've had a good team, not because we've had one good player at an important position. So when you ask what did it take to do what the Vikings did last year, I think it took a lot of good players, really, at the end of the day, and not just relying on one part of our team. And the Vikings had done that with during the Adrian Peterson era. I mean, we were relying on Adrian Peterson a lot, and I think that's fine. It was fun. It was a great run for him. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. But the Vikings were a good team, I think, last year.
All right, and a big part of that team is the quarterback position, which is the big question for the Vikings this offseason. So many questions surrounding that in terms of what will happen with Teddy Bridgewater. Will they go after a big-time free agent in free agency? Catch us up on the quarterback situation there.
Well, 3 played last year for the Vikings because Teddy did get into a game.
Yes.
So, and loves all 3 of them. He drafted and has raised Teddy. They traded for Sam, and Sam really bailed us out of a bad spot last year when Teddy got hurt. And then how can you not love Case for what he did for us last season? So Zim loves those guys, and those guys have bite, scratched, and clawed their way to success for him. So, he's going to be fine with all 3 of those guys, and he's a defensive guy, and he's got the best defense in the NFL. So he's going to be like, whichever one of the 3 we got, let's roll with them, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So that's kind of the situation with the 3 under contract. Now you get closer to free agency and the Combine, and you're talking about the draftable players out there, and this is a pretty good class. I wouldn't rule that out as an option. And then you got the names that everyone's talking about here, A.J. McCarron and Kirk Cousins, and that those names are going to be tied to the Vikings until they sign with some team.
Yes.
And I think Kirk Cousins is the one that everyone wants to know about, and it won't surprise me if the Vikings are a suitor for him.
Sure.
But I also like to flip the conversation, and I would say not just to Kirk, but to any free agent quarterback, including the 3 that are under contract for us until March 14th. This is a pretty good place for them to come, too. It's a pretty good situation, and I think that really matters for the quarterbacks. And so it's going to be really fun to watch how it plays out. You guys never have to worry about the quarterback situation, so you don't know what it's like.
We don't discuss much in Detroit because it's locked down there by Matthew Stafford.
Don't take that for granted, okay? That's a good position to be in.
Certainly. All right. We obviously are not sure what will happen with that quarterback spot yet, but how close do you think the Vikings are to sustaining that success they had last season into 2018?
I think that they're really close. And another thing that doesn't get talked about a lot is that Dalvin Cook will come back.
Sure.
And
he went down in that game against the Lions.
Against you guys, yeah. And he's, I think, I'm not a doctor, but I think that he's going to be good to go for Week 1. It looks like, everyone's been optimistic about his prognosis. So that's really good. And so the defense is going to be intact. You're going to get Dalvin Cook back. And someone's going to play quarterback for us that we think. And so I think that the Vikings are going to have a really good shot to sustain that success. The backbone of the team is the defense. They allowed 12.5 points per game at home last year. I think it was 16.9 for the season. And you're going to win a lot of games playing that type of defense. In fact, the Vikings are 30-4 when they score 21 points under Mike Zimmer. So I think the backbone of the team being the defense and the defense being intact is going to give the Vikings a good shot to be in the mix in the division in 2018.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for your insight. And thank you also to Mike Spofford and Larry Mayer, who joined us earlier. That is the look around the NFC North for this offseason. We thank you so much for tuning in to this live show on this Thursday of the Combine. Make sure you tune in because we plan on being live at 1 p.m. every single day as the Combine continues. Make sure you watch it on NFL Network starting tomorrow and through March 5th. Thanks, guys, so much for tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow.